Okay, think about your digital life for a second. All the apps, the websites, the services you use every single day. Ever wonder what's holding it all together? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the invisible conductor that orchestrates pretty much everything you do online. Let's dive in.
I mean, seriously, have you ever really stopped to think about that? It's Friday night, everyone's ordering food, and yet somehow the app just works. How do these massive platforms handle millions of people all at once without just completely melting down? It feels like magic, but I promise you it's not.
And here's where it gets fun. The answer is a technology that was originally codenamed Project 7 by its creators at Google. And yeah, that was a direct nod to the Star Trek character 7 of 9. Stick with me, because this story is way more fascinating than you might think. So to understand why this technology was such a complete game changer, we have to rewind a bit and look at the huge problem it was designed to solve. For a long, long time, building software was kind of like building a giant precarious Jenga tower.
This old-school approach has a name: monolithic architecture. Just picture it. Everything, the user login system, the payment processor, the product recommendations, all of it is tangled up into one single massive chunk of code. So if you wanted to change one tiny little thing, you'd have to carefully pull a piece out, swap it, and then redeploy the entire application, basically just hoping the whole tower didn't come crashing down.
So you can see the problem, right? A monolith is slow, it's super risky, and it's a nightmare to scale. Let's say the payment system gets a huge surge of traffic. Well, you can't just scale that one part. Nope. You have to scale the whole thing, a huge waste of money and resources. There had to be a better way. And thankfully, there was. It's called microservices.
So the first big step in this whole revolution was to just break that monolith apart, take all those little pieces and put them into their own standardized, easy-to-move boxes. This is where we enter the world of containers.
With this new approach, instead of one giant, tangled application, you have dozens, maybe even hundreds, of tiny, independent services. You've got a service for payments, one for user accounts, one for inventory. You get the idea. Each one can be developed and updated all on its own. So if one of them fails, the rest of the system just keeps on chugging along.
But okay, now you've got all these little pieces floating around. How do you keep track of them? The answer is something called containerization, and the most famous tool for the job is Docker. The best way to think about a container is like a real-life shipping container. It doesn't matter what's inside, it's a standard size and shape, so you can move it from the developer's laptop to a massive cloud server, and you know it's just going to work. And each of these containers follows a really simple, predictable life cycle. You create it, you run it, you can stop it, and eventually you delete it. This makes everything way easier to manage, but, it also created a brand new problem. Look, microservices and containers are amazing, but you've really just traded one giant Jenga tower for like 1,000 tiny, fast-moving Lego bricks. Now you've got a new kind of chaos. How do you possibly keep track of it all? This brings up some really important questions, right? Who's making sure all these containers can actually find and talk to each other? What happens if one crashes in the middle of the night? Who restarts it? And who decides which servers they should run on to be the most efficient? You need a conductor for this massive digital orchestra. And that's exactly what container orchestration is. It's the system that automates all of that mess. It's the air traffic control for your code. It's the brains of the whole operation, telling every single container where to go, what to do, and making sure the entire system plays in perfect harmony. Now, for a while, there were a few different technologies competing to be the chief conductor, but one project came along and just absolutely became the undisputed king of the hill, and its name is Kubernetes. So Kubernetes, our Star Trek-named hero, was born inside Google. But the moment that changed everything, the truly genius move, came in 2015 when Google just gave it away. They open-sourced it and donated it to a neutral foundation. And that move was so brilliant that by 2017, even its biggest rivals like Amazon and Microsoft had basically surrendered and adopted Kubernetes as the one true standard. So how does this thing actually work? Well, the easiest way to picture it is like a brain with a lot of hands. In the middle, you have what's called the control plane. That's the brain. It makes all the big decisions. Then you have all these worker nodes. Those are the hands. They're the actual servers that do the work of running your containers. So when that dinner rush hits your food app, the brain, the control plane, sees the traffic spike and immediately tells the hands, the worker nodes, to create more copies of the ordering service to handle the load, and it all happens automatically. That's the magic. Now, if you really want to sound like you know what you're talking about, You just need to know a few key terms. The nodes. Those are the servers, our hands. On those nodes, your containers actually live inside little groups called pods. To make sure those pods can find and talk to each other, you use things called services. And then, watching over the whole thing is the control plane, the brain we were just talking about. That's pretty much it.
So this technology isn't just some cool engineering project. Oh no. It is the foundation of a gigantic and incredibly fast-growing industry. So let's talk about the money.
In 2024 alone, the market for just the tools that manage all these containers is worth over $845 million. I mean, that's already a huge number, but honestly, it's just the starting line.
Because this market is expected to grow at an absolutely staggering rate. We're talking over 17% every single year. That's not just growth, that's an explosion. It just shows you how essential this stuff has become for any business that wants to stay competitive.
And where is it all going? If it keeps up that pace, this is on track to be a $4 billion market by 2033. Think about that, a $4 billion industry built just on the idea of conducting an orchestra of code. It's wild. So who's actually using this? Well, while smaller companies are definitely getting on board, it's the huge enterprises that are really driving this, making up 70% of the market. I mean, they're the ones with the massive, complex problems that a system like Kubernetes was practically born to solve.
And this tech is just everywhere now. Of course, IT and telecom are leading the way, but look how else is a major player. Banking and finance, they need systems that are incredibly reliable. And retail, they need to handle those insane traffic surges during sales like Black Friday. They all depend on orchestration to survive. Okay, so we've seen where this technology came from and just how big it is today. So what's next for the invisible conductor of our digital world?
Well, the future is all about getting smarter. As this quote points out, the next logical step is to start plugging AI and machine learning directly into the conductor itself. Just imagine systems that don't just react to traffic spikes, but can actually predict them. Systems that can heal themselves before they even fail and optimize how they run in ways we can't even dream of today. And that brings us to a final, pretty mind-bending thought. We built these amazing conductors to manage the chaos of all our tiny little services. But as those conductors themselves get infused with AI and become incredibly complex, it leaves us with one heck of a question. Who or what is going to conduct the conductors? Thanks for watching.